Hey everyone, welcome to chapter 4. Remember our last chapter is all about the cell and all the tiny organs or organelles in the cell and how they all provided a job, like our organs do, for the whole unit of the cell, the whole body of the cell. Well, chapter 4 is about the energy and where does the energy come from for the cells. Now we mentioned in the last chapter it was called photosynthesis for plant cells and it was called cell respiration for animal cells. So those are the two main things we're talking about in chapter 4. They can be confusing, but remember I sent you a link of videos for those two concepts, and I think Crash Course and Hank will really help you with that. Lots of students say how much it's helpful. So chapter 4 talks about energy. Well, what is energy? Energy is something that gives you the capacity to do work. All living things need some form of energy to survive. And it's not energy of me sitting here or energy to get up and chase my dog or that sort of thing. It's the energy to make all the reactions in my body work. So for my eyes to see and what's going on with the rods and cones in the back of my eye, that requires energy. My stomach digesting breakfast, that's a type of energy. My muscles to sit upright, even though when we sit, we don't think we use many, but the muscles to sit are using energy. So where does all that energy come from? So let's look at some of this energy in this chapter. Here's some energy. There are two forms that we get from our energy, and one is called potential energy and one's called kinetic. Potential energy is the energy that's stored. So what potential do you have? If you're feeling sluggish, you might not have a lot of potential energy that day. If you feel great energetic, you might have a lot of potential energy. So the energy stored that can have you take off running to the car during a rainstorm, or you're slow to get out of the bed. What kind of stored energy do you have? Now, batteries are potential energy because they're sitting there on your shelf being waiting to be used. So that's called potential energy. Here it's showing the kid sitting up at the top. He has potential energy because soon he's going to have energy of movement coming down. That's our second energy, and that's called kinetic. Kinetic, not the state, is energy of motion. So you can store the energy in food, and we do this by measuring the amount of energy each food has, right? We measure food energy by calories. How much energy is in a food that we eat? Is it good energy that our body can use, or is it kind of bad energy which just stores and still makes us feel exhausted? Like sugar, right? We tease with kids, they have a sugar rush. So they'll eat a pixie stick or a ton of candy, have this great sugar energy motion, and all of a sudden crash. Well, that's not good energy. That's not good calories. So calories are a unit of energy for food. So they have all the potential that we could use. So you know a potato has more potential energy than an apple. Because once you eat the potato, it turns into kinetic energy in your body. You're breaking it down, you're using it, you're storing it for later, and you're not hungry for another hour or two. If you eat an apple, although good for you, it doesn't have a lot of stored energy. So when you eat it, you're hungry in 20 minutes. So those are some of the relations to how kinetic energy and potential energy relate to us in biology. So with science, chemistry, biology, all related in this field, how is energy created? Think about how we make energy for our homes, right? We have to either put two molecules together or split it, and that's what nuclear power does. It's splitting or adding atoms, because when you split things, like here it says energy, we have three of these circles. This is adenosine triphosphate. Tri means three, so these are three phosphate. So this is ATP, our energy molecule for our cells that we get from food. That is what we really need is the ATP. If we break one of these bonds right here, make it two, so it's now called ADP, because D means di for two, where tri is three. So if we have ADP, we broke that phosphate from that group, we get energy. And the energy helps our cells to do work, which makes us build to do muscle movements. It helps us move. So breaking the bonds, and then essentially we're going to put this phosphate back on at the end of a reaction, that's going to make another type of energy. So breaking bonds and adding them together is a type of energy. We're converting it. So one of the big principles in science is energy cannot be destroyed. It's converted from one form to another. Just like energy. Energy can't be destroyed. It's from one form to another. You know, religion talks about that. All the religions, that people have a soul, and that's your energy, and it can't be destroyed, right? It just goes from one form to another. So this is a topic that's out there everywhere in all the disciplines. So with energy, let's look at these as this builds. These are populations and stuff we talked about in chapter 1, and ecosystems and the biosphere all adding together. So here's some of our energy. Energy flows through living things, right? So here's that chloroplast. It's in all plant cells. Plants use the energy from the sun. So when you're eating something, do you think you eat something that has a result from the sun? You do, because whether you're eating beef or pork or chicken, they ate grain that came from the sun and came from a chloroplast. If you don't eat meat and you only eat plants, same thing. All those plants have chloroplast that's using energy from the sun. So we all need the sun, essentially. So that's why the earth is powered by it. So in this process, this is a plant cell, because a plant cell has both this chloroplast and this mitochondria, and they interact together. So first, the plant must get all of the molecules to make food with to eat it. So here we have carbon dioxide and water coming into the chloroplast. We have sunlight coming into the chloroplast. And the job of the chloroplast is to take those three things and make a form of sugar, not white sugar you put in like your drinks or whatever. It's glucose. Glucose is a healthy form of sugar. Your brain uses it a lot. So this type of sugar and oxygen. But it's not done. So the chloroplast for the plant makes sugar and oxygen. And of course, we love plants that help provide oxygen for our environment. And that's where it's coming from photosynthesis. So when photosynthesis is done, the plant then sends the sugar and the oxygen to the mitochondria it has in its cell. The mitochondria does cell respiration, which means it takes the sugar and the oxygen, moves the molecules around, creates water and carbon dioxide. Well, don't you know, for a plant, water and carbon dioxide are the two things that form photosynthesis. So this is how the plant can continue to make food and eat it and survive. It's because of these two little organelles and the processes they do. Now, we don't have a chloroplast. Can you imagine if you got hungry, you're in class, you can't leave or anything, and you stick your arm out the window and go, okay, I'm full now, I've had my snack, and then you continue on. Like, that'd be amazing, right? But we can't. So we need to eat food, which gives us the sugar, and we breathe in, right? That gives us the oxygen, which then gets sent to all of the mitochondria in all of our cells. And don't you know, mitochondria helps make energy, right? Your muscle cells have the most mitochondria in your body because your muscles help power you the most, right? So all of your skeletal muscles, your leg muscles, your arm muscles, your stomach muscles, they have a ton of mitochondria. And do you know that Olympians and athletes that compete at high levels, like in the NBA and the hockey leagues and the football leagues and whatnot, they have more mitochondria than typically you or I do. That's how they can outperform all the other athletes. They're actually built better. They have more mitochondria. So we need this for energy. So when we go through, here's some of the plants, again, that represent one cell, like photosynthetic bacteria, which means this bacteria is doing photosynthesis. Algae that's big, or we could have a tiny little microscopic algae, and all of these land plants. If they have these green leaves, they're doing photosynthesis. So these are called producers. They're the ones that produce the first layer of energy. After producers, we're consuming, we're taking, right? So all the other layers are consumers, whether you're a human, whether you're a cow eating the plant, whatever it might be, you're a consumer. So what we're doing is taking solar energy from the sun and we're converting it to chemical energy, which is food, which is energy that's potential, that's stored. So plant is storing energy. So when you eat lettuce or carrots, you're eating their stored energy and getting energy from it, right? If you eat a cow that's been eating plants, well, they have stored energy double in their body and you're eating that as well. So we're taking all this solar energy and converting it to a chemical energy in our food. This is the equation for photosynthesis. So you have to know this. The equation for photosynthesis is sort of like a math equation. You have your reactants, remember this from the first couple of chapters, and your products. So you're taking carbon dioxide and water and the sun, they're reacting together to make a form of sugar and oxygen. Now, we also have an equation for cell respiration, which will come up. And you're going to notice that cell respiration is oxygen and sugar combining together to make water and carbon dioxide and energy. So it's complete opposite. It's the same equation, one's one way and one's the opposite way, but they're exactly the same. So here's our chloroplast again. Coming to our chloroplast, which is inside the leaves of all the plants. And in these cells is one organelle. And remember that as the sunlight comes in, the sunlight actually has a charge to it. They have photons. The photons is what's bouncing around on these like a ping pong machine or like the big transformers on telephone poles. Inside of that, that energy bounces around. So this is what happens to that. As it bounces around, it breaks apart the carbon and the oxygen, the hydrogen and the water, or the hydrogen and the oxygen, and it rebuilds them into sugar, which is glucose. Now glucose, if you look at these letters, is C6H12O6. So all of these letters are built to make that sugar. And here's some examples of what we are as consumers. So now there's cell respiration. Again, cell respiration takes potential energy from our food, that chemical energy, and converts it into ATP for all of our cells to use. So again, we're not eating just because we're hungry. We're eating because our cells need the energy of that food, which is stored chemical energy, to break it apart for our kinetic energy, for our ability to do work. A lot of science words, maybe listen to that again, but that's the main purpose of why we eat. So let's go into this. We already looked at the plant cell. These are the parts of the chloroplast. You have an outer membrane. Remember, the membranes of the cells are made of phospholipid bilayer, so it's not just this line. There's actually tiny phosphate heads and lipid tails. You have the inner membrane. This is fluid. It's not just air. It's like cytoplasm. It's like jelly. It's called stroma. Again, all biology words. This one individual green circle is called a thylakoid. It's a disc. And a stack of thylakoids is called a grana or a granum. So those are what all of these parts are called. And then here on the top of the green leaf, not on the bottom, on the top is where these cells are with these chloroplasts, because they need to have the sun reach them. So chloroplasts won't be on the bottom in the cell because the sun isn't going to come up from the bottom. It comes down from the top, right? And that's where photosynthesis works. Chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a pigment. Like melatonin on your skin is a pigment. It makes you various colors of brown or maybe a little jaundice looking or a little yellow. That is your pigment. It's melatonin. Chlorophyll is a type of pigment. Chlorophyll is in all green leaves. Chlorophyll absorbs all the colors of light. Light is red, blue, orange, green, yellow. It absorbs all the colors but green. So when you look at leaves, what you see is the reflected light it doesn't absorb, which is green. Beta carotene, you've heard of that, is in carrots. Beta carotene's pigment is orange, so it absorbs all of the colors of the light spectrum but orange, and that's why carrots are orange. So at these light spectrums, again, it helps with this photosynthesis. Green absorbs solar energy better, or not green, all the colors do but green, so it's really helpful. Here again, this is the full equation for photosynthesis. Remember, we start with carbon dioxide, water, and the sun, and we get a sugar and we get a water. Now, if we were in chemistry, we would want this to balance. So that's why you see a 6 here and a 6 in front of the water and a 6 over here. All these numbers must add up to be equal on both sides. So this is officially the correct photosynthesis equation. C6H12O6, this is the sugar. This is glucose. This is glucose makeup of its molecules. And you know water is H2O. Well, we have 6 waters over here. So that's what this means. It's still carbon dioxide plus water plus the sun equals a sugar and an oxygen. Now the sugar, it says it's glucose, but with plants, it's not glucose all the time. It's cellulose, which you've heard of, the roughage that we eat. It could be chitin. Chitin is the sugar that makes the skeleton on bugs. When you step on a spider and it crunches, that's the carbohydrate, that's the sugar, but it's a different makeup. It still C's, H's, and O's, but a different one, but it's all related. The next video, I'm going to get more into this, perhaps. Let's see how far we go. I only have 2 minutes. But in photosynthesis, you have 2 steps. You have the light reaction, which is where the chloroplast is collecting the sun and converting that energy into a sugar. And then you have what's called the Calvin cycle. That's step 2. The Calvin cycle is actually what takes the water and the carbon dioxide and converts it into that glucose or that carbohydrate. So that's called the Calvin cycle. It's done not in the light, so a lot of times it's referred to as a dark cycle. It's not dark, it's just not happening with the use of the sun. With our, let's get down to carbohydrates, or not carbohydrates, cellular respiration, so it comes through all of our plants. Taking a while to load right now. Here is a good comparison with the light system, that first step in photosynthesis where you're taking in sun, water, the chlorophyll's using it. You are making energy doing that, ATP for the cell, and you're going to get extra electrons as a charge and energy out of that first step as it's going through. The Calvin cycle, it talks about a moment as well. Talking about carrots and beta carotene. Here's the Calvin cycle. So this is the second part of photosynthesis, right? It's not happening in the light. We don't need the sun for that. So the energy from that first reaction, that first part, this is a helper molecule that helps move energy around. And our carbon dioxide goes into this Calvin cycle, into these membranes to help make that carbon and that sugar. that sugar and oxygen is then going to leave the chloroplast and go to this organelle for photosynthesis. For cell respiration. So with cell respiration, I'm going to save that for